Book 2 of the Demonology of King James, Chapter 5. Argument. Witches' actions towards others, why there are more women of that craft than men, what things are possible to them to effectuate by the power of their master, the reasons thereof, what is the surest remedy of the harm done by them. Philomathes. For truth, your opinion in this seems to carry most reason with it. And since you have ended, then, the actions belonging properly to their own persons, say forward now to the actions used toward others. Epistemon. In their actions used toward others, 3 things ought to be considered. First, the manner of their consulting thereupon. Next, their part as instruments. And last, their master's part, who puts the same into execution. As to their consultations thereupon, they use them oftenest in the churches, where they convene for adoring, at what time their master, inquiring at them what they would be at, every one of them proposes unto him what wicked turn they would have done, either for obtaining of riches or for revenging them upon any whom they have malice at, who, granting their demand, as no doubt willingly, he will, since it is to do evil, he teaches them the means whereby they may do the same. As for little trifling turns that women have ado with, he causes them to disjoint dead corpses, and to make powders thereof, mixing such other things there amongst as he gives unto them. Philomathes. But before you go further, permit me, I pray you, to interrupt you one word, which you have put me in memory of, by speaking of woman. What can be the cause that there are 20 women given to that craft, where there is 1 man? Epistemon. The reason is easy. For as that sex is frailer than man is, so is it easier to be entrapped in these gross snares of the devil, as was over well proved to be true by the serpent's deceiving of Eve at the beginning, which makes him the friendlier with that sex since then. Philomathes. Return now where you left. Epistemon. To some others at these times he teaches how to make pictures of wax or clay, that by the roasting thereof the persons that they bear the name of may be continually melted or dried away by continual sickness. To some he gives such stones or powders as will help to cure or cast on diseases, and to some he teaches kinds of uncouth poisons, which mediciners understand not, bracket, for he is far more cunning than men in the knowledge of all the occult properties of nature, end bracket. Not that any of these means which he teaches them, bracket, except the poisons which are composed of things natural, end bracket, can of themselves help anything to these turns that they are employed in, but only being God's ape, as well in that as in all other things, even as God by his sacraments, which are earthly of themselves, works a heavenly effect, though no wise by any cooperation in them, and as Christ by clay and spittle wrought together opened the eyes of the blind man, John 9. Suppose there was no virtue in that which he outwardly applied, so the devil will have his outward means to be shown, to be shows, as it were, of his doing, which have no part of cooperation in his turns with him, how far that ever the ignorant be abused in the contrary. And as to the effects of these two former parts, to wit, the consultations and the outward means, they are so wonderful as I dare not allege any of them without joining a sufficient reason of the possibility thereof. For leaving all the small trifles among wives, and to speak of the principal points of their craft, bracket, for the common trifles thereof they can do without converting well enough by themselves, end bracket. These principal points, I say, are these. They can make men or women to love or hate each other, which may be very possible to the devil to effect, seeing he, being a subtle spirit, knows well enough how to persuade the corrupted affection of them whom God will permit him so to deal with. They can lay the sickness of one upon another, which likewise is very possible unto him, for since by God's permission he laid sickness upon Job, which may he not far easier lay it upon any other. For, as an old physician, he knows well enough what humour dominates most in any of us, and as a spirit he can subtly waken up the same, making it peccant or to abound, as he thinks meet for troubling us, when God will so permit him. And for the taking off of it, no doubt he will be glad to relieve such of present pain as he may think by these means to persuade to be caught in his everlasting snares and fetters. They can bewitch and take the life of man or woman by roasting of the pictures, as I spoke before, which likewise is very possible to their master to perform. For although, bracket, as I said before, and bracket, that instrument of wax is no virtue in that turn going. Yet may he not very well, even by that same measure, that his conjured slaves melt that wax at the fire, may not, I say at these same times, subtly as a spirit, so weaken and scatter the spirits of life of the patient, as may make him on the one part for faintness to sweat out the humour of his body, and on the other part for the not concurrence of these spirits, which cause his digestion, so debilitate his stomach, that his humour radical continually sweating out on the one part, and no new good suck being put in the place thereof, for lack of digestion on the other, he at last shall vanish away, even as his picture will do at the fire, and that knavish and cunning workman, by troubling him only at some times, makes a proportion so near between the working of the one and the other, that both shall end, as it were, at one time. They can raise storms and tempests in the air, either upon sea or land, though not universally, but in such a particular place and prescribed bounds as God will permit them so to trouble, which likewise is very easy to be discerned from any other natural tempests that are meteors, in respect of the sudden and violent raising thereof, together with the short enduring of the same. And this is likewise very possible to their master to do, he having such affinity with the air as being a spirit, and having such power of the forming and moving thereof, as you have heard me already declare. For in the scripture that styling of the prince of the air is given unto him, Ephesians 2. They can make folks to become frantic or maniac, which likewise is very possible to their master to do, since they are but natural sicknesses. And so he lays on these kinds, as well as any others, they can make spirits either to follow and trouble persons, or haunt certain houses, and affright oftentimes the inhabitants, as hath been known to be done by our witches at this time. And likewise they can make some to be possessed with spirits, and so to become very demoniacs. And this last sort is very possible likewise to the devil, their master, to do, since he may easily send his own angels to trouble in what form he pleases, any whom God will permit him to so use. Philomaethes. But will God permit these wicked instruments by the power of the devil their master to trouble by any of these means any that believes in him? Epistemon. No doubt, for there are three kinds of folks whom God will permit so to be tempted or troubled: the wicked for their horrible sins, to punish them in the like measure; the godly that are sleeping in any great sins or infirmities and weaknesses in faith, to waken them up the faster by such an uncouth form, and even some of the best, that their patience may be tried before the world, as Job's was. For why may not God use any kind of extraordinary punishment when it pleases him, as well as the ordinary rods of sickness or other adversities? Philomaethes. Who then may he free from these devilish practices? Epistemon. No man ought to presume so far as to promise any impunity to himself, for God hath before all beginnings preordained as well the particular sorts of plagues as of benefits for every man, which in their own time he ordains them to be visited with. And yet ought we not to be the more afraid for that of anything that the devil and his wicked instruments can do against us? For we daily fight against the devil in 100 other ways, and therefore as a valiant captain fears no more being at the combat, nor stays from his purpose for the rumishing shot of a cannon, nor the small clack of a pistol, suppose he be not certain what may light upon him. Even so ought we boldly to go forward in fighting against the devil, without any great terror for these his rarest weapons, than for the ordinary whereof we have daily the proof. Philomaethes. Is it not lawful then by the help of some other witches to cure the disease that is cast on by that craft? Epistemon. Nowise lawful, for I gave you the reason thereof in that axiom of theology, which was the last word I spoke of magic. Philomaethes. How then may these diseases be lawfully cured? Epistemon. Only by earnest prayer to God, by amendment of their lives, and by sharply pursuing every one, according to his calling of these instruments of Satan. For his punishment to the death will be a salutary sacrifice for the patient. And this is not only the lawful way, but likewise the most sure. For by the devil's means can never the devil be cast out. Mark 3. As Christ says, and when such a cure is used, it may well serve for a short time, but at the last it will doubtlessly tend to the utter perdition of the patient, both in body and soul. Chapter 6. Argument. What sort of folks are least or most subject to receive harm by witchcraft? What power they have to harm the magistrate, and upon what respects they have any power in prison, and to what end may or will the devil appear to them therein? Upon what respects the devil appears in different shapes to various of them at any time. Philomaethes. But who dare take upon him to punish them, if no man can be sure to be free from their unnatural invasions? Epistemon. We ought not the more of that restrain from virtue, that the way whereby we climb thereunto be narrow and perilous. But besides that, as there is no kind of person so subject to receive harm of them as these that are of infirm and weak faith, which is the best buckler against such invasion, so have they so small power over none as over such as zealously and earnestly pursue them, without sparing for any worldly respect. Philomaethes. Then they are like the pestilence, which smites these with most sickness, that fly at farthest, and apprehend deepest the peril thereof. Epistemon. It is even so with them, for either is it able to them to use any false cure upon a patient, except the patient first believe in their power, and so hazard the tinsel of his own soul, nor yet can they have less power to hurt any than such as condemns most their doings, so being it comes of faith, and not of any vain arrogance in themselves. Philomaethes. But what is their power against the magistrate? Epistemon. Less or greater, according as he deals with them. For if he be slothful towards them, God is very able to make them instruments to waken and punish his sloth. But if he be the contrary, he, according to the just law of God and allowable law of all nations, will be diligent in examining and punishing them. God will not permit their master to trouble or hinder so good a work. Philomaethes. But after they be once in hands and confinement, have they any further power in their craft? Epistemon. That is according to the form of their detention. If they be but apprehended and detained of any private person upon other private respects, their power, no doubt, either in escaping or in doing hurt, is no less than ever it was before. But if on the other part, the apprehending and detention be by the lawful magistrate, upon the just respects of their guiltiness in that craft, their power is then no greater than before that ever they meddled with their master. For when God begins justly to strike by his lawful lieutenants, it is not in the devil's power to defraud or bereave him of the office or effect of his power and revenging sceptre. Philomaethes, but will never their master come to visit them after they be once apprehended and put in confinement? Epistemon, that is according to the state that these miserable wretches are in. For if they be obstinate and still denying, he will not spare, when he finds time to speak with them, either if he finds them in any comfort, to fill them more and more with the vain hope of some manner of relief, or else if he find them in a deep despair, by all means to augment the same, and to persuade them by some extraordinary means to put themselves down, which very commonly they do. But if they be penitent and confess, God will not permit him to trouble them any more with his presence and allurements. Philomaethes, it is not good using his counsel, I see then. But I would earnestly know, when he appears to them in prison, what forms does he then take? Epistemon, diverse forms, even as he used to do at other times upon them. For as I told you, speaking of magic, he appears to that kind of craftsman ordinarily in a form, according as they agree upon it among themselves, or if they be but apprentices, according to the quality of their circles or conjurations, yet to these kept creatures he appears as he pleases and as he finds best for their humours. For even at their public conventions he appears to diverse of them in diverse forms, as we have found by the difference of their confessions in that point. For he, deluding them with vain impressions in the air, makes himself to seem more terrible to the grosser sort, that they may thereby be moved to fear and reverence him the more, and less monstrous and uncouth again to the craftier sort, lest otherwise they might stare and shudder at his ugliness. Philomaethes, how can he then be felt, as they confess they have done him, if his body be but of air? Pestamon, I hear little of that among their confessions, Yet may he make himself palpable, either by assuming any dead body and using the ministry thereof, or else by deluding as well their sense of feeling as seeing, which is not possible to him to do. Since our senses, as we are so weak, and even by ordinary sickness, will be oftentimes deluded. Philomethes. But I would spare one word further yet, concerning his appearing to them in prison, which is this: may any that chance to be present at that time in the prison see him as well as they? Epistemon. Sometimes they will, and sometimes not, as it pleases God. Chapter 7. Argument. Two forms of the devils visible conversing in the earth, with the reasons wherefore the one of them was commonest in the time of the papistry, and the other since then. Those that deny the power of the devil deny the power of God, and are guilty of the error of the Sadducees. Philomethes. Has the devil then power to appear to any other, except to such as his sworn disciples, especially since all oracles and such like kinds of illusions were taken away and abolished by the coming of Christ? Epistemon. Though it be true indeed that the brightness of the gospel at his coming scaled the clouds of all these gross errors and paganism, yet that these abusing spirits cease not ever since at some times to appear, daily experience teaches us. Indeed, this difference is to be marked between the forms of Satan's conversing visibly in the world. For of two different forms thereof, the one of them by the spreading of the evangel and conquest of the white horse in the 6th chapter of the Revelation, is much hindered and become rarer thereby. This, his appearing to any Christians, troubling of them outwardly, or possessing of them constrainedly, the other of them is become commoner and more used since then. I mean by their unlawful arts, whereupon our whole purpose has been. This we find by experience in this eisel to be true. For as we know, more ghosts and spirits were seen than tongue can tell in the time of blind papistry. In these countries, where now by the contrary, a man shall scarcely all his time hear once of such things. And yet were these unlawful arts far rarer at that time, and never were so much heard of, nor so rife as they are now? Philomethes. What should be the cause of that? Epistemon. The diverse nature of our sins procures at the justice of God diverse sorts of punishments, answering thereunto. And therefore, as in the time of the papistry, our fathers erring grossly and through ignorance, that mist of errors overshadowed the devil to walk the more familiarly among them, and as it were by childish and frightening terrors, to mock and accuse their childish errors. By the contrary, we now being sound of religion, and in our life rebelling to our profession of faith, God justly by that sin of rebellion, as Samuel calls it, accuses our life for so wilfully fighting against our profession. Philomaethes, since you are entered now to speak of the appearing of spirits, I would be glad to hear your opinion in that matter. For many deny that any such spirits can appear in these days, as I have said. Epistemon, doubtlessly, who denies the power of the devil would likewise deny the power of God, if they could for shame. For since the devil is the very contrary opposite to God, there can be no better way to know God than by the contrary, as by the one's power, bracket, though a creature, end bracket, to admire the power of the great Creator by the falsehood of the one, to consider the truth of the other, by the injustice of the one, to consider the justice of the other, and by the cruelty of the one, to consider the mercifulness of the other, and so forth, and all the rest of the essence of God, and qualities of the devil. But I fear, indeed, there be over many Sadducees in this world that deny all kinds of spirits, for convincing of whose error there is a cause enough, if there were no more, that God should permit at some times spirits visible to make known. The third book of the Demonology of King James the First. Argument. The description of all these kinds of spirits that trouble man or woman, the conclusion of the whole dialogue. Chapter 1. Argument. The division of spirits into four principal kinds, the description of the first kind of them, called spectra and umbrae mortuum. What is the best way to be free of their trouble? Philomaethes, I pray you now, then, go forward in telling what you think fabulous, or may be trusted in that case. Epistemon, that kind of the devil's conversing in the earth may be divided in four different kinds, whereby he frightens and troubles the bodies of men, for of the abusing of the soul I have spoken already. The first is where spirits trouble some houses or solitary places. The second, where spirits follow upon certain persons and at diverse hours trouble them. The third, when they enter within them and possess them. The fourth is these kinds of spirits that are called vulgarly the fairies. Of the three former kinds, you heard already how they may artificially be made by witchcraft to trouble folk. Now it rests to speak of their natural coming, as it were, when not raised by witchcraft. But generally, I must forewarn you of one thing before I enter into this purpose. That is, that although in my discoursing of them, I divided them into diverse kinds, you must notwithstanding thereof, note my phrase of speaking in that, for doubtlessly they are in effect but all one kind of spirits, who, for abusing the more of mankind, take on these sundry shapes, and use diverse forms of outward action, as if some were of nature better than others. Now I return to my purpose. As the first kind of these spirits, they were called by the ancients by diverse names, according as their actions were. For if they were spirits that haunted some houses by appearing in diverse and horrible forms, and making great din, they were called lemures or spectra. If they appeared in likeness of any deceased to some friends of his, they were called umbrae mortuorum. And so innumerable stylings they got, according to their actions, as I have said already. As we see by experience, how many stylings they have given them in our language in the like manner. Of the appearing of these spirits, we are certified by the Scriptures, where the prophet Isaiah, chapters 13-34, threatening the destruction of Babylon and Edom, Isaiah 13, Jeremiah 50, declares that it shall not only be wrecked, but shall become so great a solitude as it shall be the habitation of owlets, and of Zim and Im, which are the proper Hebrew names for these spirits. The cause why they haunt solitary places, it is by reason that they may frighten and shake the more the faith of such as them alone frequenting such places. If our nature is such as in company we are not so removed to any such kind of fear as being solitary, which the devil knowing well enough, he will not therefore assail us but when we are weak. And besides that, God will not permit him so to dishonour the societies and companies of Christians, as in public times and places to walk visibly among them. On the other part, when he troubles certain houses that are dwelt in, it is a sure token either of gross ignorance, or of some gross and slanderous sins among the inhabitants thereof, which God by that by that extraordinary rod punishes. Philomathes. But by what way or passage can these spirits enter these houses, saying they allege that they will enter, door or window being shut? Epistemon. They will choose the passage for their entrance according to the form that they are in at that time. For if they have assumed a dead body, whereinto they lodge themselves, they can easily enough open without din any door or window, and enter thereat. And if they enter as a spirit only, any place where the air may come in at is large enough an entry for them. For as I said before, a spirit can occupy no quantity. Philomathes. And will God then permit these wicked spirits to trouble the rest of a dead body before the resurrection thereof? Or if he will so, I think it should be of the reprobate only. Epistemon. What more is the rest troubled of a dead body, when the devil carries it out of the grave to serve his turn for a space, than when the witches take it up and destroy it, or when swine root up the graves? The rest of them that the Scripture speaks of is not meant by a local remaining continually in one place, but by their resting from the travails and miseries of this world until their later conjunction again with the soul, at that time to receive full glory in birth, and that the devil may use as well the ministry of the bodies of the faithful in these cases as of the unfaithful. There is no inconvenience, for his hauntings with their bodies after they are dead can no wise defile them in respect of the soul's absence. And for any dishonour it can be unto them, by what reason can it be greater than the hanging, beheading, or many such shameful deaths that good men will suffer? For there is nothing in the bodies of the faithful more worthy of honour, or freer from corruption by nature, than in these of the unfaithful, until the time they be purged and glorified in the latter day, as is daily seen by the vile diseases and corruptions that the bodies of the faithful are subject unto, as you will see clearly proved when I speak of the possessed and demoniacs. Philomathes. Yet there are some that are found to have haunted such places where these spirits are alleged to be, and could never hear nor see anything. Epistemon. I think well, for that is only reserved to the secret knowledge of God whom he will permit to see such things and whom not. Philomaethes. But where these spirits haunt and trouble any houses, what is the best way to banish them? Epistemon. By two means may only the remedy of such thing be procured. The one is ardent prayer to God, both of these persons that are troubled with them, and of that church whereof they are. The other is the purging of themselves by amendment of life from such sins as have procured their extraordinary plague. Philomaethes. And what means then these kinds of spirits when they appear as the shade of a person newly dead or to die to his friends? Epistemon. When they appear upon that occasion, they are called wraiths in our language. Among the pagans, the devil used that much to make them believe that it was some good spirit that appeared to them, then either to forewarn them of the death of their friend, or else to discover unto them the will of the deceased, or what was the way of his slaughter, as is written in the book of the Histories Prodigious. Histories Prodigious. And this way he can easily deceive the pagans, because they knew not God. And to that same effect is it that he now appears in that manner to some ignorant Christians. For he dare not so delude any that know that neither can the spirit of the deceased return to his friend, or yet an angel use such forms. Philomaethes. And are not our werewolves one sort of these spirits also, that haunt and trouble some houses or dwelling places? Epistemon. There has indeed been an old opinion of such like things, for by the Greeks they were called lycanthropoi, which signifies man-wolves. But to tell you simply my opinion in this, if any such thing has been, I take it to have proceeded but of a natural superabundance of melancholy, which, as we read, that has made some think themselves pitchers, and some horses, and some one kind of beast or other. So suppose I that it has so vitiated the imagination and memory of some as Pelucidia inter illa, it has so highly occupied them that they have thought themselves very wolves indeed at times, and so have counterfeited their actions and going on their hands and feet, pressing to devour women and children, fighting and snatching with all the town dogs, and in using such like other brutish actions, and so to become beasts by a strong apprehension, as Nebuchadnezzar was 7 years, Daniel 4, But as to their having and hiding of their hard and shelly slurs, I take that to be but learned by uncertain report, the author of all lies. Chapter 2. Argument. The description of the next two kinds of spirits, whereof the one follows outwardly, the other possesses inwardly the persons that they trouble, that since all prophecies and visions are now ceased, all spirits that appear in these forms are evil. Philomaethes, come forward now to the rest of these kinds of spirits. As epistemon, as to the next two kinds, that is, either these that outwardly trouble and follow some persons, or else inwardly possess them, I will come join them in one, because as well the causes are alike in the persons they are permitted to trouble, or as also the ways whereby they may be remedied and cured. What kind of Philomaethes, what kind of persons are they that are used to being so troubled? Epistemon, two kinds especially, either such as being guilty of grievous offences, God punishes by that horrible kind of scourge, or else being persons of the best nature, peradventure, that you shall find in all the country about them, God permits them to be troubled in that sort for the trial of their patience, and wakening up of their zeal, for admonishing of the beholders not to trust overmuch in themselves, since they are made of no better stuff, and peradventure blotted with no smaller sin, as Christ said, speaking of them upon whom the tower in Siloam fell, Luke 13, and for giving likewise to the spectators matter to praise God, that they meriting no better, are yet spared from being corrected in that fearful form. Philomaethes, these are good reasons for that part of God, which apparently moves him so to permit the devil to trouble such persons. But since the devil has ever a contrary respect in all the actions that God employs him in, which is, I pray you, the end and mark he shoots at in this turn. Epistemon, it is to obtain one of two things thereby, if he may. The one is the tinsel of their life, by inducing them to such perilous places at such times as he either follows or possesses them, which may procure the same, and such like, so far as God will permit him, by tormenting them to weaken their bodies and cast them into incurable diseases. The other thing that he wishes to obtain by troubling of them is the tinsel of their soul, by enticing them to mistrust and blaspheme God, either for the intolerableness of their torments, as he is said to have done with Job, Job 10, or else for his promising unto them to leave the troubling of them, in case they would so do, as is known by experience at this same time by the confession of a young one that was so troubled. Philomaethes, since you have spoken now of both these kinds of spirits, comprehending them in one, I must now go back again and casting some questions of every one of these kinds in particular. And first, for these that follow certain persons, you know that there are two sorts of them. One sort that troubles and torments the person that they haunt with, and another sort that are serviceable unto them in all kinds of their necessities, and omit never to forewarn them of any sudden peril that they are to be in. And so in this case I would understand whether both these sorts be but wicked and damned spirits, or if the last sort be rather angels, as should appear by their actions, sent by God to assist such as he specially favours. For it is written in the Scriptures that God sends legions of angels to guard and watch over his elect. Genesis 32, 1 Kings 6, Psalm 34, Epistemon. I know well enough wherefrom that error which you allege has proceeded, for it was the ignorant pagans that were the fountain thereof, who, for that they knew not God, they forged in their own imaginations every man to be still accompanied with two spirits, whereof they called the one Genius Bonus, the other Genius Melos. The Greeks called them Endomona and Kakodemona, whereof the former, they said, persuaded him to all the good he did, the other enticed him to all the evil. But praised be God, we that are Christians, and walk not among the Sumerian conjectures of man, know well enough that it is the good Spirit of God only, who is the fountain of all goodness, that persuades us to the thinking or doing of any good, and that it is our corrupted flesh, and Satan that entices us to the contrary, and yet the devil for confirming in the heads of ignorant Christians that error first maintained among the pagans, he bides among the first kind of spirits that I speak of, appeared in time of papistry and blindness, and haunted diverse houses, without doing any evil, but doing, as it were necessary, tasks up and down the house. And this spirit they called Brownie in our language, who appeared like a rough man. Yea, some were so blinded as to believe that their house was all the more prosperous, as they called it, that such spirits resorted there. Philomaethes. But since the devil's intention in all his actions is ever to do evil, what evil was there in that form of doing, since the actions outwardly were good? Epistemon. Was it not evil enough to deceive simple ignorance, and making them to take him for an angel of light, and so to account of God's enemy, as of their particular friend? whereby the contrary, all we that are Christians ought surely to know that since the coming of Christ in the flesh, and establishing of his church by the apostles, all miracles, visions, prophecies, and appearances of angels or good spirits are ceased, which served only for the first sowing of faith and planting of the church. When now, the church being established, and the white horse whereof I spoke before, having made his conquest, the law and prophets are thought sufficient to serve us, or make us inexcusable, as Christ says in his parable of Lazarus and the rich man, Luke 16.